Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us to come speak with you guys. I guess I kind of thought the first place to start would be for us to talk a little bit about how student bands work here at Bellevue. And this is actually not something that Bellevue's been doing. You know, there's a lot of things that Bellevue's been doing and doing well for many, many years. But this is one of those things that I think 2019 was when we started it. And it sort of grew out of a place of us needing a really good equipping outlet for our students. And so I think maybe it would be a beneficial thing to just introduce a little bit of the things that we do here to you guys, and then maybe to open it up with some more specific discussion. But our we have a program basically that we started, which is our student worship training program. And in that program, we have students who are in bands, you know, playing typical rhythm section type instruments, guitar, bass, keys, drums, that kind of thing. And then we also have students who are part of this program that are vocalists. You know, they're capable singers and they want to learn more about worship leading on the stage. And so they're sort of part of this group too. We also have, you know, on occasion or on more of an as needed basis, we have some folks who play the violin or play some other sort of instruments that accentuate or that can have a role in a band driven like worship setting that we will include too, sort of as needed. But so that whole program that we run is called Worship U, as in like worship university, worship with a U on the end, basically. And so it's the name that we've sort of dubbed our student worship training program here at Bellevue. And that was something that Jeff and I started back in 2019. At that time, Jeff was an associate worship leader or whatever in the contemporary worship team. And I was associate too. So we were two associates who both students. Jeff had a student band, which I'll let you talk about this in a second. But Jeff had a band of students that he was kind of meeting with every week and working with and training up. And I had a couple different vocal groups that I was meeting with every week and working with them some and training them up. And both groups they were just hungry for really good experience and growth in what it means to be leading worship from their instrument with their voice on a stage. And I remember me and Jeff just kind of got together one day and we're like, you know, we feel like we could do this better if we worked together on this. Right. And that was kind of where Worship U was sort of born, the idea behind it. And then, you know, it took a couple of months to kind of flesh it out, develop it, figure out what it was going to look like. But it was definitely born out of a desire from us to train up these students. And it was also, I mean, a big important part of it was just we had students that were hungry to learn and to grow, and we wanted to equip them and we wanted to help sort of satisfy that hunger by giving them good opportunities to grow and do that. So I don't know, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about what maybe your student bands looked like
pre-worship? So as I was an associate back then, our contemporary worship pastor sort of had it set in stone that our people would currently serve with us on a Sunday could also potentially be available to serve with us on a Monday for college worship or Wednesday in high school and middle school. And the idea of that was to have excellence all across the board. But what was sort of missing from that was the student-led side of things. So, you know, it was students missing seeing their peers leading them in worship. And so, you know, we had such great excellence through that, but that was a big missing factor there. And so, you know, one of my thoughts was, how can we at least blend the styles, if nothing else? Mm-hmm. And so we had at the time a program similar to Worship U, but on a smaller scale, like Kaleb said, and it was called Praise Band League back then. I did not come up with the name, so don't judge me there. And it was, much smaller scale. What I did was I worked with the band, just training them into leading worship. And a lot of times it was students anywhere from middle school, high school, essentially. And we had some great great students that really just, like what Kaleb said, just were hungering for doing something like this. And so it really got us thinking, like, we've been missing the mark for a good while now, because our students really want this, but what have we done to train them and develop that in them? Because as all of with the technology that we have available nowadays, there's so many different ways, so many different things that we can have charge over, but if not trained appropriately on them, can go out of hand very quickly. So just think about, how can we develop those skills, to develop all the technology, all those side of things, and to do it well, to do it with excellence, and do it in a way that's pleasing to the Lord, right? So we started combining together really in the fall of 2018, and then by the time we got to 2019, we're like, okay, this is working. What do we do with this?
Yeah, just to jump on something Jeff mentioned too, like I was working with a couple different vocal groups, and they're mainly like performance-driven groups. It was like a high school ensemble of students, and we would work on some more like traditional type stuff, some more like sacred church music type things. And then just one of the things that we would do every once in a while is I'd teach them a couple worship songs, and they'd sing for this service or that service. And I could tell that really that excited them, that really lit their fire. And so that was what I wanted to feed, that desire in them. I wanted to feed a little bit more. And so that was, part of the motivation of us, getting together and teaming up on this. But, I know, knowing me, so I'm about to turn 30. I'll be 30 this month. And so I was, I'm not too far removed from where a lot of you guys are right now. I was just sitting there in a classroom myself just a handful of years ago, and a big part of my story was my worship pastor growing up decided to go out of his way to invest in me and to give me a chance to serve on the worship team, and I was just playing the saxophone. That was my instrument. Right. And so he's like, yeah, come be in the worship band. And that was probably, I was a freshman in high school. And that he didn't have to do that, but because he reached out to me and he gave me that opportunity, the Lord really used that to stoke that fire inside of me and to direct me down my own calling towards full-time ministry. And so that was something that I felt like I wanted to pass along to the next generation. And I know we've definitely seen that over the last few years as we've had sort of our first wave of students that have been with us for a couple of years and are now in college, or are now pursuing their own ministry callings. To me, that's the real joy that I take out of this, is knowing that we are passing along what we know, and we don't know everything, but just the things that we've learned and been taught over the last few years, we're passing that along, and hopefully we're equipping and encouraging the next group of ministry leaders who in the next 5 or 10 years will be leading their own church music ministries, or serving in their own church music ministries. And hopefully they're passing along the things they learned too. So the exciting thing for me is looking down the road and seeing how us just being faithful in the thing that God has placed under us to do is going to create waves, and hopefully lead to many people getting to live out their ministry callings. And so I think we've started to see the first waves of that as we've been doing this. But
just to add to that too, we at least from the praise band league side, right before we switched over to worship U, we just saw one of our students that was in that just got his first worship pastoring position this past semester. That's been really exciting to see, just the fruit of how the Lord's using worship U.
Maybe this is a good moment to pause and ask if there are any questions from you guys about anything that we do as part of our program. We've just kind of basically given you the overall approach that we take, but there's a lot more to be said, I guess, from us about the getting in the weeds, ins and outs of what we actually do week to week to rehearse and things like that. So those questions might come later, but I guess I might pause just for a second to make sure that everybody's tracking with us, if there's any other questions from the room. Okay, great.
Right. So here's a question that you might have already planned to answer, but so you've got, I don't know, at Bellevue, you may have 2, 3, 500 students, whatever. What is your process from that large group of students to who shows up in your worship youth?
That's a great question. So our worship you students, for instance, let's take this fall, for example, and every year looks a little different based on the interest that we have. This fall, I think we have in our actual program 2 bands of students, so probably what, 10 to 12?
Yeah, I think 12
instrumental students with us, and then we probably have maybe closer to 15 vocalists. Those are the ones that actually end up else. Yeah, I look like I'm frozen.
We can hear you though.
You can hear me still?
Yeah, keep talking.
All right. Well, I'll just
we'll figure this out as we go.
Just stop me if we need to. Okay. Well, so we have about 15 vocalists, 10, 12 instrumentalists, and out of those students are the ones who have gone through the audition process, and we've placed them based on their own readiness and skill level into the group that's going to sort of be the most beneficial thing for them. But I would say we probably we do auditions twice a year, and we probably have maybe twice that number audition or something like that. And so those are the ones that we end up sort of taking into the program. Now, we do have very large numbers in our student ministry. I don't know exactly what Jeff, you probably have a better idea of how many come to our weekly things for student ministry stuff.
Yeah, attendees, I believe we have anywhere from 350 to 400 or so that's high school and middle school.
Yeah.
It's usually
do they meet separately, and do you separate your players high school and middle school?
That's a good question. So they do meet separately for their worship times. They meet at the same time, but in separate rooms. And then for us, we usually figure out who our teams are, more so based on readiness and skill level, things like that. But we kind
of have one group that's more of the sort of, they have the core of what they need, and they're kind of ready to go for worship leading.
Yeah.
The other is a little bit more of a developmental group, but we honestly approach both groups with the desire that we want to give them time on the stage leading worship,
Right.
We don't have a group that's just strictly developmental, and we never put them out, to do any worship leading.
We do try to keep in mind age though, as well.
Yeah,
we're doing that. But if it comes down to it, we're usually thinking a little bit more.
If we have some vocalists, for example, who are just sort of ahead of the curve, and they might be an 8th grader or something. We have put them in the upper group before, if they're sort of mature and ready to go now. And then there are also sometimes some high schoolers that are sort of exploring this calling in a new way, and they're a little more green. And so we want to give them more time to develop. And so we, might put them in the more developmental group, but really the goal is always giving both groups of students the best possible experience that they could have. And that means, the 2 groups go at a slightly different pace. There might be more music that the more ready group is able to go through at a faster pace. And there might be a fewer set of songs that we do with the other group, and that gives them a better experience because that gives them more time to learn, the ins and outs of chord shapes and, more technical things that the other group might just kind of gloss over and keep on running,
As we're recruiting mainly in the fall is when our big recruitment comes in. We've got another thing we keep in mind is we got a lot of reoccurring students as well. So we may have sophomores and juniors that are now becoming seniors and juniors instead. And so another thing we try to keep in mind is leadership. I think this fall we've got one of our drummers actually is probably more ready than most team members on the team. And so we kind of look to him as a leader, even though he's, I guess, so to speak, just a drummer, but we try to let them know, hey, you're not just a drummer, you're a worship leader as well.
Amen.
So we look.
Amen.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think, Mark, you had also asked about just sort of the process of how do we get people aware of our program and get people involved. It was trickier when we were first starting out. I think we sent an initial, we sent out emails to the different groups of students, definitely the sort of the big groups of the students that met for just the worship times weekly, just to make them aware of this new thing that we were starting at that time. Now we found that we're a few years down the road from the origins of this thing. We find that we don't have to do as much recruiting because we have a lot of carryover year to year. I bet we have, this is just, I'm guessing on this number a little bit, Jeff, but I bet we have 75% of our students this year that this isn't their first year in worship year.
Right.
Typically, we have a handful of students that have been in it since 2019, I think. Think of Lily Dory or whatever.
Yeah.
But so we have a lot of students that they get involved and they get plugged in and they're having a good experience. And so they're staying year to year. Mm-hmm. And we also kind of take the approach of, down the road, we might end up with 3 groups, if we have, it's really just based on the interest that we have and the, amount of people who are sort of ready for something like this. And we kind of have to take a fresh approach each fall when we start off for the next year and say, okay, who are we working with from instrumentalists? And, this year we have 4 drummers, which for us is okay, do we make 4 different groups or do we do 2 groups and have them rotate? Right. So there's a certain amount of adapting that we do on our end based on the interest that we have from students and just always with the mindset of we want to give them the experience that they need to grow. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how we approach the whole recruitment side of it. And then obviously anytime, we have 2 bands, like this year we have 2 bands, we meet for an hour and a half every week. And so everybody's meeting simultaneously. And so we have 2 different spaces they have to be in, and we have to have leaders to take and run with the 2 different teams at the same time. And so that's something to be aware of, as you guys are looking at doing this, who do you have that you can ask to come in and be a leader and to pour those students that you really trust that can sort of multiply your ministry, because there's only one of you and there may be times where you have to have multiple locations. And that's one thing we've really we're blessed with here at Bellevue is we have a lot of people that are skilled at what they do, but are also passionate about pouring into the next generation. So just as you guys are thinking about how are you going to recruit the students, you also got to think about how do you recruit the people to help run the thing.
Yeah, because I think
we've moved through in and out of that some.
I think the desire in that is that we wouldn't leave anyone out that could potentially be ready for something like this, ready for the training, and they're willing and they're able. And the less manpower we have, the less availability we have for help, the less we're able to take on. And so I know for me personally, it always hurts just a little bit if we're kind of forced to leave someone out because there's just not enough help or whatever, not enough space. And so that is definitely something to strongly consider, because I think we all probably have that desire within us, is that if we're looking to do some sort of training for students, that we don't want to leave anybody out, especially if they're willing, they're able, they're ready for something like this.
Yeah, it's an interesting line to walk, because you don't want to give anybody a bad experience. Like if they're not ready, you don't want to put them out on the stage and then for them to have what they feel like is an embarrassing moment, or you want to set people up to succeed and to have that good experience to propel them down the path and to excite them, and so it's always tricky, and it's something we really have to think about and pray through very carefully anytime we're on that initial stage of starting that year of Worship U, and we've gone through the audition process, and you're looking through a list of names, but each name, represents a person who it has a real desire to do this thing. And so it's never an easy yes or an easy no, really. There's a lot of, weighing our options and us wrestling with what's the best way we can incorporate as many of these as possible. So that's honestly some of the hardest parts of the semester, I think, for us is, praying through that list of names and figuring out who's going to be involved. But yeah, I think the big thing for us when it comes to recruitment is just it's driven by the people that we have interested in the needs that we have in the people.
When does your worship you meet, and what are the other things happening on your church campus at the same time?
Jeff, I'll let you address that.
So the way we kind of lay out meeting times, and I'll extend that too and talk a little bit about how our semester lays out. So Worship U generally meets within the vicinity of a school semester for students. And so usually we're doing auditions sometime in August. And then we will start the actual semester usually when all of our other regular Wednesday programming will start, our midweek and all that.
That's like early September.
And that'll go through pretty much for us later November. We always end a little bit earlier probably than average church for midweek. We usually end before Thanksgiving. And then the spring semester, we'll pick back up in the spring semester in January, and then go through to about the beginning of May, usually, for each semester. So what we used to do, I'll tell you what we used to do first. We used to meet every Thursday, and we would go from back then it was 4:30 to 6.
I think it might have been 4 to 5:30.
4 to 5:30. Okay, yeah. 4 to 5:30. And most of the time, the first 30 minutes would involve really just sitting down with our group and really just discussing anything that we would need to. So sometimes it could just be getting into the word together. We may have someone come in and share with with the students about, hey, what it's like worshiping on the platform, but we need to be worshipers off the platform, then talking about that for 30 minutes. It could be, hey, let's talk about how to dial in an ear mix, anything like that. It could be anything. And then for that next hour following that, then we'd kind of get together with our teams, go over some music, learn some music, build the repertoire, get playing together, building chemistry together, talk about that, what that looks like. And a lot of times our singers and our bands would meet separately, and then sometimes they would come together. So, sometimes, because the hardest thing about some of this,
sometimes you're teaching music and you have to,
right. Sometimes the hardest part about this is you have to deal with one particular thing and the rest of the team is just sitting there waiting while you're doing that. And so sometimes spreading them and meeting separately helps for those reasons, especially up front when they're just beginning to learn these songs for the first time. And then, so usually towards the end of the semester, we will have more opportunities for them to actually lead worship. Most of the time for these groups, we haven't had groups yet that have been able to lead on a super consistent basis. So most of the time what we've been doing is have them start training, working together for the beginning of the semester. And then towards the end of the semester, have actual times where they can lead worship in high school, lead worship in middle school. And then
it's basically a couple times a semester we try to have each group lead. And then like with the vocalists, they're also every week for our student ministry worship times. There's a rotation of singers that are students. And so their vocalists are sort of getting some additional experience that the band members might not. But we know a big part of the benefit for these students is getting a chance to actually do it. Worship leading is one of those things, if you don't actually get on the stage and see what it feels like and actually do it, then you can't really grow in it. You can simulate it all you want, but that's a big desire of ours, is just to give them those opportunities to like a safe space, where they're doing music they've worked up and that they feel good about, so that there's some confidence, but that also, it's not easy to lead worship in front of your peers, especially, at that age,
Yeah.
but it's as safe of an environment as possible for them to grow and to make a mistake maybe sometimes, but then to be able to find a way to move past that and to continue on, so for us, I mean, that's a big part of what we want to do to equip these students, is to give them those actual experiences.
Right.
So at least a couple times a semester.
Okay, I think some of the students have some questions to ask. Jeremy, what do you know?
Sure. Can you talk about the audition process and what you do? Is that one-on-one? Do you audition them with a band or in front of other people? And what do you do for that process?
Yeah. Jeff, you want to start with the band students, and I'll take vocals.
Yeah. So usually we give them time slots of about 15 to 20 minutes or so for them to come in and audition. A lot of these students we know already, but if we don't know them, we're going to ask them their story, how have you come to know the Lord, things like that. We're going to do that first. But then during the actual audition,
in advance, you want to talk about in advance what we send them.
Yeah.
before they come.
You do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, a couple weeks out before our worship youth semester starts is when we're hoping to be doing auditions. So even a week or two before that, we'll send an email goes out to anybody who's been in worship youth in the past, and would be interested in continuing in it. And it also goes out, I think we usually send it out to sort of next gen as a whole,
Yeah.
So a big email goes out, says, hey, worship youth is going to be starting back in a month or so. If you're interested in auditioning, click on this link and register. And then they also, when they register, they get sent basically initial materials. It's usually like one song for instrumentalists, which would be like, we send them the chart for it, like a demo of it. Do we send them anything else? I can't remember if we send like a click.
Vocals will send a vocal chart.
Yeah, vocals, we send a vocal chart to. And then we have a guy's key and a girl's key that we send to vocals too. So they prepare that song in advance. So we give them a couple weeks in advance to sign up and then to work up their part, whether they're a singer or a drummer or guitarist, whatever it may be, on that particular song. And that's the song that we mainly focus on when they come in for their in-person audition. So Jeff was saying, we give them a 15 or 20 minute time slot for the band, and they'll come in, and Jeff will, we kind of greet them as they come in, and Jeff helps them get plugged in and set up. I think for a band, and you should probably talk more about this, Jeff, not me, but I think we don't have a full band ready to go with them. They play along with a click track and with the other stems and stuff on, so they can get a realistic feel of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, usually for our audition process, we remove whatever instrument they are auditioning for and then put everything else in, so we can replicate the full band experience as much as possible for them. And then
we like
most
put them
of
on
the time,
they're on the stage that
yes,
rehearsals are, and so they kind of get a sense of that even in the audition process,
Yeah, and usually we can tell some readiness, through that if they are, if they're not. Oh, never played with a click before. Okay, well, that's something, we train for those things as well. So it's not like we're saying no if they can't play with a click either. Not necessarily. Another thing, with multi-tracks, if any of you work with multi-tracks, that it doesn't come with a vocal stem. So usually I'll plug in a mic and sing with it as well. Because for some students, just the guide track is just not enough for them to know exactly where they are in the song. So I'll sing on it as well, just to give them, again, just as much to simulate as possible as a full band, full worship team experience.
Yeah, vocalists are pretty similar. I just use a separate room for the vocalists, but we'll just bring them in one by one too. So it is a one-on-one audition. And we have, like I said, we've already sent them in advance a guy's key version of a song and a girl's key version of a song. And so I typically I'll talk just a minute with them just to loosen them up a little bit, and because most of them are students and are nervous, and so we talk for a minute, and then I'll ask them if they want to do any kind of a warm-up or whatever. We do that real quick, and then usually I just jump into them singing. I'll have them sing along a little bit with just the instrumental track of it. I don't use a click or anything in that audition for them, but then at a certain point I'll stop the track and just kind of keep playing along with them on the keyboard. And usually I don't usually I don't need to hear too much of it to know kind of where they are. And I always try and give them a couple of valuable pointers here. There are things that they can be working on. I always try and, like I would recommend always compliment something that they're doing. There's always something that you can commend about someone when they first come in, especially a lot of these students are just young. And so all they are doing is just the things that they instinctually do. And so find something to commend them on, and then give them just nicely a couple of things that they can think about for the future. And then that way, whether they end up making Worship U or not, they've left with an experience that they've had some valuable information given to them that they can go off of. So I guess, in short, we give them the materials in advance, they kind of prepare it, and then they come for the actual in-person audition. And it's just more of a one-on-one thing.
Right.
We don't audition everybody together. It's all sort of split off individually.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, Allison.
Brown, sorry. When you send out the tracks of the charts, do you tell the students this is a girls track and this is a boys track? Or do you say, here are two different keys, try them and pick which fits you best?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tell me if I'm wrong, Jeff. I think we typically just say we pick a guy's key. This is the guy's key version of the song that would be, we make sure it's in a range that would work for guys with higher voices or lower voices. Same kind of thing for the girls' key. You could probably go to one extreme and you could say this is soprano led, alto led, tenor led, that kind of thing. But a lot of these students are young enough, they really don't know what voice part they are. Even if you said, high key, higher guy's key or lower guy's key, or higher girl's key, lower girl's key. A lot of them, they just don't know enough about their voice yet to know where they fall. And so we try and just pick a song. We think about the song and the range of it. So we try and pick a song already that's a little bit of a narrower range. And then we go ahead and pick based on what we know about probably 95% of people's voices that it'd be something that they could sing. Okay. And then in the room, one thing that I will do would be if they come in and they start singing, I can tell, this key is a little high for them. It'd really be in their sweet spot if it was a step lower. That's why I have the keyboard there. I'll just play it a step lower. And then that way I can see, if they're really in the sweet spot of their voice, how are they going to do, and I think it's the same kind of thing. We basically just, for simplicity's sake, try and I don't want to give them too many options where they have to listen to it and think, okay, well, I don't know. Does this feel good? Does this feel bad? I'm not sure. I want to give them fewer options, and then in the moment when I'm in with them one-on-one, I can,
take control.
Take a little more control in that. Yeah, that's a great question, though.
That's a good question. Yeah, we haven't run into any issues with that so far. With students, saying, "Oh, this is nowhere near my key," that kind of deal. I've had one guy on staff with me that was a true alto, and that's the only one I've seen so far. That was
a real high voice.
Yeah. With students though, we haven't run into any issues with that.
Yeah, and there have been times where we've done two different songs, a girl's song and then a guy's song. The other thing is we always, that's worked okay too. We always try and pick a song that a lot of them are already familiar with, that a lot of them are already singing in their weekly meetings with Next Gen, or at least it's just a well-known song, worship song. And so a lot of them, will pull it up and be like, oh yeah, I know this song. And that gives them a little extra confidence as they're approaching it. That also means though, that I know coming in that they're probably instinctively emulating a lot of what the original artist was doing. And so I do try and get them out of that a little bit so that they can, I can just explore, okay, what does Jimmy actually sound like when he's just singing like Jimmy, Right. So there's definitely, we leave ourselves some room for flexibility in the moment on the audition, but we try and reduce the amount of options we give them in the initial materials, just for the sake of streamlining things.
Okay. Ryan, you got one?
Yeah. This is just more of a keyboard question because I do a lot of keyboard work. Do you do Sunday sounds? Are you in the Nord stage 3? Like, how do you do all the keys work for Worship U?
Yeah, it's a good question. For a while we did Worship Essentials, Abel Mendoza, and then we had a guy on staff for a while that was really good with keyboard technology, and so he designed one for us, and that's what we've been using currently. And essentially what that involves is, you know, keeping it as simple as possible for the students to understand, but also giving some flexibility if we need it. And what that usually means is just a basic piano sound, basic electric piano sound, a little more mellow, a basic Rhodes sound, basic organ sound, and then a basic pad sound. And all those can be layered onto each other if you want them to.
So
transition.
And Jeff like shows them how to navigate that, how to use the different layering and things. And I know like for a lot of the worship leading platforms, I mean, not the next gen ones, I guess, but like in our main worship center stuff, we pretty much use Nords as the keyboard. So I think a lot of it is trying to teach them a variety of approaches and things so that they're not completely thrown off anytime they encounter a new one or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I use Sunday Sounds for my MIDI rig, and then for the seminary we have a Nords. I use the Nord because they have the V3 sounds. But I'm looking into in the future because I'm always trying to improve sound wise and professionalism. But there's with multi-tracks, Jim Danker, who was the keyboardist for Michael W. Smith, he retired, but he's doing his own thing. He released like these pads through multi-tracks. Do you know anything about that at all with multi-tracks and pads? Because I know there's ones that you can just fire them, but there's ones that you can download into main stage. I'm looking into that, but it does cost quite a bit of money, which I'm kind of holding off right now.
I think what I saw, I don't know if this is multi-tracks or not, but they have a template in main stage that I think you can go section by section of a song, and it triggers the different section of the song. So for a verse you have this particular sound, and then you can trigger a different section and it triggers these different sounds for the chorus or whatever. Is that multi-tracks?
It sounds like Ableton, I think.
Yeah, it's Ableton. Yeah. That's the only thing I've seen that kind of triggered that in my memory. So yeah, I don't think I've seen what you're talking about from, you said that was Michael W. Smith's guy?
Yeah, Jim Danker. He does work with multi-tracks. I saw the idea for their ads. So I'm looking into it, but it comes with a big price tag, which makes sense because it has like 300 patches that you can download. So
yeah, the biggest thing for us, and this even goes for our rotation people, but which by the way, when we do rotation on a general basis for Mondays, for Wednesdays, and some people we have come in, some people bring their own rigs, and this is not Worship U, by the way, this is our rotation of musicians. Some of our people bring their own stuff in, some of the people don't have anything, and so we provide something like that for them and say, hey, we've got this if you want to use it. So it has to be easy and simple to use, but also does what we need it to. So I'm always of the accord, like, hey, if it sounds good and if it's got a layered approach to it, that's best. So I know with multi-tracks, you can buy one individual song file, things like that. And for us, that doesn't work so well because it doesn't give that simplicity of, okay, well, I can use it for that song, but probably not this song. So we try to stretch it to where we can use our sounds for most of everything that we do in some capacity, and where it can layer on with each other.
Let me jump in. I've got one more question about student worship, and that's probably going to be all the time that we have. So you'll have several people that will audition, and you've said that, I mean, some of those, if you've got two bands, you've got a certain amount of rhythm section positions, you've got probably, I don't know, you haven't described your singer situation, but probably maybe you've got a limited number of ones, like you've either got a skill threshold for letting singers in, or you have a number of slots or that will limit the kids that make it. Bellevue is a church like Prestonwood, like First Dallas, like some other larger Southern Baptist churches that have a great tradition, ongoing use of worship choir with rhythm section, orchestra frontline, this sort of thing. So if you are providing Worship U for 350 students and you've got like a certain percentage of them make it into the rhythm section or the vocal teams, do you have anything right now that would be something that you could offer, or ways that you can work with the students that don't make it into those slots?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to address the vocalist thing real quick, so we're not limited by slots for vocalists in the same way that the rhythm section is. Just knowing that we can have, well, the only thing that limits us with the vocalists is we only have a certain number of mics per venue that they might be worship leading in, and so we have to kind of keep that in mind as we're setting the teams. But I mean, so we try and have a balance of sopranos, altos, tenors in each group. And then basically we're only limited by the number of mics that we have. But we know within that, we do kind of look for there, like you said, there is usually like a skill threshold that becomes clear in the audition process that we kind of work around. But it's a little bit of a, we take sort of our best shot at placing people. But to address your question about the other students that don't end up making it, one thing we always encourage them to, I mean, like I mentioned, in the audition process, we always give them a couple pointers in that. So they're leading with something there. We always encourage them to keep working and to audition again. One thing here at Bellevue, we have our School of Performing Arts, which is private lessons for a variety of instruments, more traditional like orchestral things, instruments, some, but also like rhythm section instruments. And so we always point them to maybe, trying to take some lessons one-on-one in our School of Performing Arts just to grow in that area. And I know I've had certain students ask about other resources and things from time to time. And I have a few different, websites and other things that I sort of push them to as a place where they can do some self-study and improvement. But outside of basically once we finish the audition process, unless students approach us directly, we don't really have any ongoing conversation or meeting with those students.
Right. That wasn't actually, I mean, I guess I wasn't talking about an ongoing conversation with them, but are there any large group ensembles that they can feed into, like as singers or players of other instruments, like Kaleb? Are there any students or a way for students to play in the orchestra, or is there a student choir or some, like if you're not training students to sing in a choir, then your big choir is going to eventually run out of singers.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so we do have student choirs here. We have a middle school student choir and a high school student choir. Those are run by a colleague of ours, Andrew Smith, and he does a great job. And basically that is not an audition group. Anybody can come, anybody can sing, anybody can get better in those groups. The School of Performing Arts would be more for those are like paid lessons. So that's more for like, hey, I really want to get in and
I know the fellows that started that at your church a long time ago.
And went there is a legend when it comes to student choir stuff.
Yeah.
And so we definitely point people to that. And honestly, there's a good number of our Worship U students that are also involved in the student choir. And so in many ways, our group is sort of a subset, like an outflowing of the students already in the student choir.
Yeah, I don't think our students probably got that from our conversation so far. I just wanted to make sure that
good clarification. Absolutely.
Because there has been decades that the big pageant at Bellevue was led by that student choir and by student musicians. And
still
the marching band at your school and everything else. So
yeah, there was a marching band at Bellevue back in the day.
Yeah.
And there's still our tickets are just going on sale today for our singing Christmas tree, and that's been going on for 47 years, and it's always been led by our student choir. And so we're standing on the shoulders of many people who've gone before us and just established such a thriving ministry. And honestly, we're benefiting from a lot of people who've just been visionaries and have done so much investment in the students of Bellevue. And it really has become part of the culture here, I would say. Music, for a while there, I felt like it was like students didn't really feel like it was cool to be involved in the music so much or be in a choir. But honestly, I don't think that our students at Bellevue have ever really gone through that, just because they've grown up watching students do their thing in productions and have been always involved in services. So we're very grateful to be a part of a legacy of students who have been involved in music and leading worship.
Yeah.